I've lived in Texas about 30 years, as people say. You know, I wasn't born here, but I got here as fast as I could. This book, though, I have to tell you, it's the second book with this protagonist, and I had wanted to write it for a long time, and then it was, I had started working on it, and my sister got very ill. She had cancer. She passed away a couple of years ago, and so I stopped doing anything when she was sick, and I just wouldn't go to see her. And then, you know, after her funeral, it was kind of like, well, I should finish this book, because I'm in my mind I had always dedicated it to her, and I couldn't dedicate it to her without finishing it. So that was really a very powerful motivation for me to get it done. I also in this book, and I was just having a discussion about Timothy McVeigh, that the authenticity, getting the history right, getting the facts right was important, and as a consequence, one of the things that I like most and that I'm really proud of with this book is that not only that there's a lot of inclusion of Native American history, but in particular, I made it a big point, often to the distress of the publishers, to include a Cherokee syllabary, and there's a special font, you know, for the language that's used, and that was really, you know, that was something that meant a lot to me to have it in here. And it's in the print book. It's at this point in the ebooks, that's not something that's easily done, so that was important. What I'd like to do today, although a lot of the book is set in Texas, is I want to read just a little bit of the back, and then read some of the scenes. And I want to, these are Texas-focused scenes, although the book takes place in northeastern Oklahoma and Paris and Florence and London. There are some, the main character is rooted in Dallas with her family, and so there are some important scenes there. And then there's an ending scene in San Antonio. When several people involved in bidding for an oil refinery are murdered, the situation becomes far more than a billion-dollar business deal. A self-made woman in the oil industry, Lynn Dayton, fights to save lives when escalating attacks reveal a hired assassin's plan to disrupt oil trade and draw another global power into dangerous confrontation with the United States. And by the way, I won't read from the first chapter, but the first chapter, and I want you to understand that I wrote this I finished it about 3 years ago, so well before the Boston bombing, but the main character, one of the primary characters in the first chapter is Chechen. Lynn Dayton and Cherokee Tribal Executive Jesse Drum must learn to trust each other so they can find and stop the killers. Can sobering up really be fatal? How have so many of the deaths been made to appear accidental? Who's creating weapons with modern poisons and ancient Cherokee arts? So, and in this one, this is a little bit more, it's a scene that kind of just sets up a little bit of the conflict, but it's just the character's name, the protagonist's name is Lynn Dayton, and in this scene, she's going on a run with her boss. You know, he said he wants to meet her, and so she's kind of like, oh, okay, I'm worried about this. So they, you know, so this is just a run in a part of Dallas. Although it was September, the days hadn't cooled enough to run later than 9 in the morning. They were to meet at the Cooper Aerobics Center, founded by Kenneth Cooper, father of aerobics. The very first reading I did was with a group of Cooper fans, so they liked that part. The 30-acre center shared boundaries with the Eruv of a nearby Orthodox neighborhood. Syed convinced her to join the Cooper since it was near his house. You're already part of the sweaty set. Make it official, he said. It seemed part of his plan to settle the where to live question by persuading her to move in with him, and Sy is her fiance. On the night she stayed over, the Cooper was convenient, particularly once Sy bought her a bicycle. She rode streets quieter than those of her dense East Dallas neighborhood and navigated a hectic crossing at Preston Road. And for those of you who live in Austin, East Dallas is our Austin. She met Mike and the bodyguards in the Cooper's parking lot, their start and finish point. The bodyguards had cleared the route, which included an overlap for a few miles with a fundraiser, 5K, It was a gentle course, and she would take it slow for Mike, another reason she exercised vigorously yesterday. She wasn't surprised the thick-set CEO initially kept up with her. She wasn't surprised at the easy stride of the security guards. Mike's was a man who looked like he'd won a few boxing matches. Cheryl appeared as steady and refreshed as she had the afternoon before when they split up at the airport. The guards ran a discreet few yards behind them. They were soon in a crowd of people on the 5K route. She'd planned this part of the run for the motivational pace and the spectators' humorous support. Sure enough, one man held up a sign reading, "If you can't be a good example, be a horrible warning." Another man offered free mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, ladies only, while a woman held a sign that read, "Run faster, they're almost out of beer at the finish line." So that's a fun run. It takes place early on. And this is a little bit later in the day, so since she's run, she gets to go to this very traditional, very interesting, it's just a diner, and it's on the south side, and it's a real place. It's on the south side of White Rock Lake, and lots of people, circle around, ride their bikes, run, whatever, to this place. And the reason they go is for the beer batter biscuits. But she's also, in this scene, she's talking to her security chief, a guy named Mark Shepard, and then there's a guy from the FBI, and he's dealt with her before. He's not really sure whether he believes her or not, but he's saying, well, I think I think this is more than just accidents. Things are going on. After the run with Mike Emerson, Lynn met Mark Shepard and Jim Cutler for breakfast at Barbeck's near the south end of White Rock Lake. From their athletic builds, it was apparent Mark and Jim seldom indulged themselves as they were this morning. Beer batter biscuits with a side of gravy. Best biscuits in the world, Jim said between bites, and I've spent time in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, so I know. They're nothing that about 5,000 crunches won't make up for, Mark said. And worth every one, Lynn replied, wiping her lips. She had ordered eggs and one biscuit, which she ate a few bites at a time. Both men had already eaten 3 biscuits each. They kept their voices low. With a few prompts from Mark, Lynn told Cutler about finding Dag Nordval. And Dag Nordval is an woman in North Dakota that had been murdered. Have you heard of a woman named Amanda Parsifal? Cutler asked. I've seen her newsletters, though not in the last week or so. Well, as we discussed, I brought in Simone Tierney with Interpol after the prince's bodyguard was assassinated in Paris. Tierney mentioned the name. The woman was poisoned with ricin. Lynn grimaced. That's awful. Lynn, Jim said, if there's one thing I've learned about you the last time we talked, it's that you're either paranoid or observant. Is that a question? Lynn felt her cheeks flame. Why don't you tell me everything else that's been happening, even if it doesn't seem connected? Cutler stirred his coffee. I'll jump in here, Mark said. We don't have complete reports back from the medical examiner yet. But first there was Tom Martin at the Tulsa refinery. When we were in Paris, you told us Gene had been notified by the ME's office he was poisoned. Turns out he died from aphaxia. He stopped breathing. What else do you know now? Lynn asked. It appears to have been brought on by batrachotoxin, Mark replied. The word toxin has a bad sound to it, Lynn frowned. Batrachotoxin blocks neuromuscular transmission, Cutler explained. It paralyzes muscles, including the ones needed for breathing. It's horrible. And it doesn't sound like something I'd find in a drugstore. No, you have to grow it, Mark said. That is, grow the poison dart frog that's the source, and be practically a surgeon to handle it. Stuff is on the frog's skin to keep it from being eaten by its enemies. It only takes a few grains to kill a human. What the hell? He said. Where'd the poison dart frog come from? Probably somebody imports exotic pets. So yeah, the poison must have been sprinkled on the food Tom ate. Lynn shook her head while she gathered her composure. After that, Gene and I tried to save Jimmy Dearwater on the turnpike when he ran his car into the bridge abutment, but we couldn't. And let's not forget, some asshole tried to run me down in a Denali. And one of the things I do in my all my free time, because I run, and it's a big car, it's the bane of my existence. So I had to get a big car in there as a villain too. Let's see. I've got a section here on the Permian, and it's kind of on my brain right now because I've been doing a lot of work on it. But I want to, it's a little bit more technical than what I want to do this time. I do want to say that as I was writing this book, I did incorporate a lot of, or some of just the current news that we're hearing about horizontal drilling and fracturing and what's going on unconventionally. A little lighter subject, and also one that absolutely you have to write about Dallas, is the Texas State Fair. And I purposely set this book in October, sort of late September, early October, so I could include the Texas State Fair. So here's my, we go every year, at least once a year, at least once. Everything was drawn toward the Texas State Fair as if by gravity. The surrounding parking lots issued for thousands of people, the trains, hundreds more. How about the extreme rides, the bungee jump, the fireball, the giant Ferris wheel? Lynn knew what the answer would be. Cy frowned and spoke before his kids could. They're too young, something could happen. Don't go on those rides by yourself, Lynn. We don't want anything to happen to you. After an 8-mile run to relieve her frustration, and this will be about just the last couple of minutes, as I said, in San Antonio, Lynn packed a suitcase and drove to Love Field. Within 2.5 hours, she was in San Antonio, introducing herself to executives from several small companies. And believe me, all the companies who are really interesting are small companies. I mean, that's been my experience sort of over and over the last few years. All were producing gas, light liquids, and oil from the nearby Eagleford field. She hoped in a room full of black suits, her green one stood out. She had chosen her colors to attract attention. Lynn needed to speak with as many people as possible. She kept her tone light. However, the Saudis had indeed stopped doing additional business with her after the death of the prince's second bodyguard, and many seemed to know it, knowledge they leveraged to drive harder bargains. Despite the clink of glasses inside and the well-lit, placid river walk outside, she shuddered when she remembered finding Dag Nordwall's body. Tom, Roberto, Jimmy, almost Keith. She had been invited to speak to the attendees about changes Tri-Coast had made in its refinery configurations to meet the newest gasoline and diesel specs. She would also listen to the panel on security and terrorism. People around her spoke in the peculiar, familiar oil field patois. Bolt a set of leases onto it. Time is the enemy. Stacked pay, nothing's better, no way, no how. This is my favorite. Our Aggies are smarter than their Aggies. Gut check. Key takeaway, land rig utilization. The voices were as intense as those on a trading floor. Lynn noticed most around her were young men, chock full of testosterone, all sharp elbows and emphatic curses. One of the youngest men, about Greg Sutton's age, sidled up to her and says, "Feels like I'm pinging a dark pool around here." What do you mean? Feeling people out. No one discusses the identity of his trading partners until the deal is signed. Right now, everyone's making small offers to see what's thumping. Like bats, more like sharks. We're all looking for big prey from small blotches of blood. That's it. Thank you so much.
Benefit or a barrier or a challenge, rather, when you draw your professional life in oil and gas into a textual writing experience in this way?
That's a superb question, because
Thank you very much.
this is the second book, and with the first book, I struggled with it a lot. And actually, it will surprise you. The thing that I struggled most, well, first, of course, you've got to kind of like make it interesting, and you really, I try to keep it to like 1 or 2 meetings per book, not like over and over. But the second thing was that when I did the first draft of the first book, or the first few drafts, all the characters looked and sounded the same. It was just terrible. I mean, it just doesn't work in fiction. So mixing it up more is really, really important. And then also, I really made an effort to kind of kind of lighten it and sort of make it accessible. And, you know, I mean, most people really do get it, and the trick is to not fall into the jargon or whatever, I mean, of whatever field you're writing about, so, yeah. But, I mean, it's an easy fallback, and but it's, you know, it always has to come out in the third or fourth draft, you know, a lot of stuff. So,
Yeah, I know
yeah.
meetings would make that great event.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, in my meetings, there's always a fight, but, you know.
Oh.
of some
Well,
sort.
ours too, in the academy.
Hi, Ms. Lynn.
Yes.
Is Lynn going to return to San Antonio?
I don't. Yes, as a matter of fact, in the third book, yes, yes. Well, and New Orleans. I'm kind of like marking out a few places, but I'm kind of, you know, the Gulf of, sort of the Eagle Ford Shale, Gulf of Mexico, New Orleans, maybe Venezuela, you know. Might have to throw in a Russian or two. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. It's a very interesting place. So, questions?
What is your experience in the oil field?
I had a degree in chemical engineering and a master's. Mainly, I've just worked in it. I worked for oil and gas companies for about 12 years, and then since then I've done energy economics work. So I actually have this parallel life doing energy economics work.
But you actually were in the oil field,
Oh yeah.
as was I, but, especially on being pumpers and stuff.
Oh, okay.
We ran a lot of that, Denver City,
Cool. That's great.
about 6,000 wells up there.
Well, there's, you know, it's sort of happening times
But
10.
you know, they talk about jargon, if you don't use it correctly,
Oh yeah.
it's got to be accurate. As soon as I read somebody, I was like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about now, I dismiss them.
One of my critique partners used to be an airline pilot, and so anytime he reads a scene that is, you know, poorly written, it takes place in an airfield, it just drives him nuts. Because they say he throws the book across the room.
When's your next book out?
I'm working on it, so hopefully a year or two, but no contract yet.
Any more questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.